Hello, everyone. Good evening. I see people are trickling in. Hi, Anshu. Hi, Lopa. We do have about 2 minutes before we begin the webinar for the evening. So we'll just wait for these 2 minutes for people to trickle in. Okay, I think we can begin. Good evening, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome. Welcome to the information session about ILS's Emerging Women Leadership Program. So what is the purpose of this meeting? The purpose of this meeting today is really to talk about the genesis of this program. What was the need of this program? The purpose is also to share experiences by those who have embarked on this journey in the first edition of this program, and to also see if you have some questions about the program. I know there are a lot of people who are interested in the second edition of the program who've joined us today. So to see if you have some questions that we'd be very happy to answer. So without much ado, I'd like to introduce our guests for today. So we have with us Chris. Chris leads the Samaj 3.5% program at Indus Action. The program works on sourcing and scouting of active citizens in the country while they go through a 6-month journey towards becoming community leaders. Chris also leads the School Readiness Program, an action research project to ensure children below the age of 6 are holistically ready for school through play, nutrition, and education. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
We also have with us Shilpa. Shilpa is a specialist at Health System Transformation Platform, HSTP, a not-for-profit organization engaged in health policy and systems research. Shilpa manages the operations, communications, partner engagement, and monitoring progress of India health policy and systems research, a fellowship for programs. Prior to HSTP, Shilpa worked with various government organizations for over a decade, providing technical assistance in implementation of national health programs. Shilpa holds a postgraduate degree in health administration from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Welcome, Shilpa.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
And we also have with us Anu, who's the founder and CEO of ILSS. Prior to setting up ILSS in 2017, Anu was the founding deputy dean of the prestigious Young India Fellowship and founding member of Ashoka University, India's first liberal arts university. Before joining the social sector, she was a member of the initial team at American Express in India, where she had led the implementation of Amex's global financial reengineering, helping to create the Financial Resource Center in New Delhi. Post Amex, she worked as the regional head of finance for TNT, North India. Welcome, Anu.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
So, Anu, let's start at the genesis. Why the EWLP? Why did we have to have a program like the EWLP? What was the genesis of EWLP?
So thank you, Adil. I'm delighted to be in conversation with you, Shilpa and Chris. Looking forward to the hour ahead. EWLP is very close to all our hearts. We are a largely women-led organization. And when we first thought of the idea, we run leadership and capacity building for the social sector. When we first thought of the idea of mid-career women and leadership, I think the entire team was like, yes, we need to do this. And for me, it was also, I wish several decades back, there was something like this for me, it would have helped my journey. And so that's how we sort of seeded the idea. And of course, data on women and gender is not something I need to really share. We are 9% of the world's population, Indian women. Actually, there are more Indian women than the entire population of the EU. But if you look at much more, in fact, but if you look at our voice, there is something that's holding us back. And the development sector is the place where which is the most evolved. It's the best work happens here. But we found, and we conducted research, that even in the development sector, with all the right intentions, while a lot of women are entering the sector, very few are making it to the top leadership positions. We did do a research, because when we have an idea, we want to really understand if this idea holds merit, if there's even a need. While we personally felt like there was a need, we did want to scope the ecosystem and sort of talk to a lot of young women, organization leaders, to understand if this idea was worthwhile in doing. And we had some very interesting statistics. We found large number of women, almost 70+% of the women we interviewed said that they wish there was, a leadership program such as this. There was a huge demand even for networks. How do you create these safe spaces to really discuss very specific issues that women face, especially mid-career, when life is happening, parenthood, motherhood, marriage, so many changes happen at a certain age and stage in life. And that's where you need the most sort of support, right? Because you have your personal ambitions, but you also feel conflicted between other situations that are happening. And so we were really overwhelmed by the response. It was very heartening to hear more huge numbers, 70+% of the women saying, yes, we would love to have a ecosystem guide. We'd love to have someone who'd mentor us or coach us. We'd love to have a opportunity to network and build, our leadership. We'd love to understand our leadership strengths. And so that was, the research was the genesis of the curriculum. And that's how we're here today with a wonderful cohort. And Shilpa and Chris are a part of that cohort and part of that journey. And I find it amazing that we've already co-opted them into the program to talk about their journey for other participants. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to start by asking both of you some questions on what has this journey for you. Firstly, what made you sign up for this? So what were you seeking when you heard about this program? And I'll start with you, Shilpa. And then let's start with that. And then what do you feel have been some of the sort of markers in your journey thus far?
So once again, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us here. It's lovely to be, here alongside Chris, and I'm sure our fellow cohort women are also who have joined in here. What made me get into this was very simply, in this busy humdrum life that we are rushing through, literally, it came in at a time where I was actually egged on by a colleague of mine that, look, this is a program. It's an interesting thing. You need to have a look at it and need to get into it. At that time, I thought I didn't have the space or the bandwidth to take on another, sort of activity on my plate. But I'm so glad that I did take it up. I've been saying this at every sort of discussion or forum that we've had. It's been no less than almost being in therapy, if I may put it like that. It came at a time where I've got like over 12 years of experience now. I work in the healthcare sector, and right now we are also talking about these things as to how important it is to develop these leadership skills and qualities generally amongst us, and even more so being women in this space. In fact, the reading materials and everything that have come along with the course, they've been nothing short of like transformatory for me. There are chapters in like the reading books that I have literally circled as to this being a certain phase of my life. And it's been echoed across the cohort. And markers, some key moments that have stood out. It's not just been about just being in a space where women are echoing same sentiments and we are, navigating the same ecosystem, but also about taking action. So things that I could write down, that I could reflect upon, I could start taking immediate action upon them. So that has been like a very standing out moment from this program for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And they say leadership is building your self-awareness. And that's the same thing that therapy in a way does, right? You sort of almost, you start becoming more and more sort of aware of what your triggers are and what upsets you or what excites you, etc. So yeah, thank you for sharing, Chris. Chris, over to you. What made you sign up? And then what has been your, journey so far? And I know there's a question. I'll come to some specifics as we go along.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Anu, and everyone over here. I think at ILSS has made it like another home now, if I would put it that way. So why I joined, so like you mentioned, Anu, earlier, that there was a research that you went through, and I had the privilege of being a part of that research study as well. I had a conversation in the initial stages, and I did not know at that time that it was leading to a program. And when I knew that it was, I immediately wrote to my team saying that I definitely want to be a part of this. Some of the key things that emerged during the conversation also at that research study was talking about bias. And I'll be more specific. It was talking about how women really put themselves down sometimes and not want to rise up, right? And I did resonate with some of those things while we were having that conversation. And I knew I had to be in a space that allows me to push myself beyond that and rise. So I think that was the key moment when I thought I wanted to be a part of this group. And I think during the boot camp, so we had a boot camp and we all came together in person and had that discussion, which was, I think, very exhilarating to see 14 or 15 odd women in a room, which was, I think, the first aha moment for me to just hear the powerful leadership stories that everyone had to share. So I think that was one of my best experiences in the journey. And two, I think, to what you mentioned, Anu, and I wrote it in big block letters over here, it made me more aware, I think, of some of the biases that I might carry. And I think having biases is normal, but being aware of those biases, I think, has become more pronounced for me, I think, over the last couple of weeks in the program. So, yeah.
No, I remember that one of the, you will never stop learning. So as you know, even after the program is over, we are very tied into your leadership journey. But even as a leader myself, I find that I have aha moments all the time. And one of them was when we had that session where, Sujata of Koro spoke about the self-gaze. And it was such a aha moment for me because, quite frankly, I didn't realize what a strong self-gaze I myself had. And I feel like sometimes it's an age thing, but you stop dropping that gaze as you grow older. You start becoming more bindas. So I'm a little bit older, but not so much older that I haven't forgotten I have had it. Right. So I think that was for me a big one where I was hearing these leaders, all of you, and your journey, and there's so much to learn from each other. So, I think aha moments will keep happening as we go along. But, a little bit about the program. In the program, how was the experience for you around, the networking session? How do you feel? Did you feel like networking and leveraging networks is something you have a plan around now or had a plan around? What was your journey with the whole networking? Which, we spent a lot of time discussing, but, and I think is super important for all women to sort of have, not just in the program, but in their wider sort of world. But our research says a lot of women shy away from very obviously networking, and we had that discussion in our session. But what were your takes on the whole discussion around networking and building your networks? Chris?
Sure. So, I'll be very honest. I think I would have been one of those responses, Anu, during the research saying that women do shy away from networking. Definitely, it's not been one of the strongest points for me. But I think, I'll just go back to maybe not the session around networking, but also the bootcamp when we had to meet and have some uncomfortable conversations also around, which was, I think, the first step towards taking that step towards networking. And I do not want to give away parts of the program already now. Definitely some surprises there, but understanding what kind of person you are when you go to network, right? Like, are you a person who connects people, or are you a person who gives out a lot of data or information is important? I think I had no awareness of this, honestly. And when you network, you need to know what is a strong point of yours, of course, but also with people who you're connecting to. And that has been, I think, a very important moment. And I think the past two weeks, I would say, I have actively started looking out for people and started reconnecting with people, not having, I think, fear, if I may say. So that's been, I think, for me, lesson 101 on networking, I would say.
No, but Shilpa, I'd like to understand from you, what was that whole, when we were in a session on networking and building networks, did you feel like, okay, you know what, I mean, not everything in leadership needs to be like, do I really need to network? I mean, just because people are discussing it, was there any conflicts in your mind, or did you feel like, this isn't, something maybe I necessarily want to do or feel like I need to do? I mean, or were you sold? Were you convinced that, okay, maybe I do need to sort of build it in the way that matters, works for me?
So I've always believed that networking is important, but like Chris said, I've never taken up opportunities very actively whenever it was offered to me. In hindsight, I can see that, oh, I could have done this, or maybe I could have followed a particular thread, etc. And I also shared this with my fellow cohort, wonderful batchmates also, that I would prefer, there's this whole thing where I think we also prefer to let our work speak for ourselves, thinking that, it's enough, our work will be showcased when, we don't have to go out there and actively seek the limelight. So the session on networking really brought out the importance of, I felt, which is also in one of, the action plan, like Chris said, we shouldn't be letting out too much of what we are going through in the course. But so there's this action plan where we are working, and I'm actively looking at, like, making myself more visible. So where I knew that I was always a very social person, I don't have any qualms about going up to a person and start initiating a conversation per se. But when it came to actually, capitalizing on an opportunity which came up, I would shy away from it, which was also echoed by a lot of my fellow cohort women. So that session really put that light on how, in a way I could call it, there are lots of times when it is very tangible, but there are lots of times when it is not so tangible. So we need to really be attuned to that sense, and I think the session gave me that sort of impetus to that, look, no matter what, even if you go out there, you don't have to just stop at making small talk, and you don't have to, you will not seem opportunistic if you initiate a conversation on a particular opportunity that comes up, or explore other things. All that the worst that could happen is you would have a no, or sorry, that doesn't work. So that was one key moment for me. Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting when you are doing something very consciously, when you're reaching out to a network, to know that, okay, there are a whole bunch of women behind you who are cheering you, saying, yeah, you got to do it. It's good. Go, rah, rah, rah. But But these are long journeys, and so much of how you're thinking today and how you're thinking about the future will keep evolving as you build your sort of leadership. But I want to touch upon another aspect that came to me a little late, which was around coaches and mentors and stuff. Because I remember that I happened to accidentally meet my coach. It was very sort of, I think it was a blessing, but and one of the first things he told me when I was recounting my life, I had several career shifts. Before Ashoka University, I was in the corporate world. In the middle, I'd even run a travel company, as you all heard when I told you all. And he said, when did you build a vision for yourself? And I remember feeling gobsmacked because I don't know if I'd built a vision for myself. I was a little bit going with the flow and life was happening and I was throwing my heart and soul into my work. And so I always did well because I was just that kind of person who, whatever she did, would just. But I wasn't really following, and that was a revelation for me. So just this whole thing of having coaches or having someone that's guiding you, or at least asking you, what's your vision for yourself? What's your vision for 5-10 years later? How has that experience of having an ecosystem guide and that conversation been for you guys? Either Shilpa?
Yeah, so for me, it's been fantastic. It's been fantastic because we, as part of my current profile, we run a fellowship program also, which is more into, it's all about health and health policy and systems research. And we have a very similar sort of setup where we have a mentoring component. It's been very helpful for me to have been on a parallel journey myself in this leadership component, because the way the ecosystem guides are structured, the sessions are very, very on point. I felt like I could discuss my issues with my guide, and I get very pointed, responses or replies, very, very targeted, very focused, which is very vital for me, for the kind of person that I am, to put me back on track, or to make me work towards my goals. So even in this, during the course, like you mentioned, the same thing, I went through the same thing as to, I know I was on this journey to doing something, to achieving something, but I never paused or, reflected upon what is the action that or the vision that I have for myself, and thus what are the actions that I need to take to achieve those things. So these discussions, one-on-one discussions with the ecosystem guide and matching them with our profiles, etc., I think it's been done wonderfully. We also tried like a group thing, like sort of two of us with our ecosystem guide. That also worked wonderfully, but the one-on-one sessions were fantastic, because it's very very individual and very personalized. And like I just needed to give a situation, and she would just run with it, and I know this is how it happens. And it brings that, as women, we reach out to, whether it is fellow colleagues at the workspace, or we always have these pockets, right? I mean, in the family, there's somebody you speak to. In your women's circle, there's somebody you speak to. But having a sort of almost third person who you're developing a bond with has been fantastic for me. Yeah.
Chris, anything to share about your experience with your coach or ecosystem guide?
Sure. I mean, I was just going to say echo everything that Shilpa said. But I think with my ecosystem guide, I think it's been great. One is because when you are with a one-on-one coach, especially a person who is experienced, they ask the right questions, right? And when I was with my coach, I was able to also understand some underpinning beliefs that was probably stopping me from doing what I want to do. It helped me answer some of those questions. I think that was one thing one of the great experiences I had during my sessions. But apart from just the ecosystem guide, Anu, I think my experience, like how Shilpa said, was there were coaches at every point, I think, through the entire journey, from be it the boot camp or even, through our every week sessions. I was able to reach out to not just the speakers, maybe, or not just the facilitators, but also my fellow leaders. So I think coaching happened, maybe unintentionally, also happened in very, very different forms. But it did help me push my boundaries, because we also have an individual development plan that we all create. It's made me constantly go back and think what my vision is, right? Because on our normal, regular working days, we're thinking about the vision of the organization, we're thinking of the vision and mission of our goals. But very less time we get to step back and say, okay, what is my vision as a leader? And how is that mapped to the larger the goal and the ecosystem? So I think that was something that was very fruitful for me to see those coaches in every bits. Yeah.
And I think also putting yourself first and this is your journey, and it's important because we are so, in so many ways, we are primary caregivers at home, and there are so many roles we play. And I think it's really important to almost say, this is my leadership journey and I'm going to invest in it. And there is an ecosystem of support that's investing in my leadership journey, and it's important. So, I think it's, I know Archana has put in a question there on, how has, Archana, do you want to come in and ask that question? I'm not very good with the chat box as well as the question box as well as us. It's just, how has
Sure. I think, Chris, it was really inspiring to hear about how you've seen guides and coaches across the different people you've met through the program. And while ecosystem guides are a specific person mapped to each participant with the label of an ecosystem guide, the reality is that there are many others who you might have met through the program who've been a guide, who've been a coach for you. And as you were sharing that, I remembered that one, again, both of you spoke about it, is just that community of women who, participants who showed up for one another every session, right? Because ultimately it's about you all and what you're creating together. And so would love to hear from both of you on, I know you spoke a little bit about it in terms of what's been that experience in terms of being on this learning journey with a dozen and more other women who are similar in some ways and yet so diverse in terms of journeys.
Yeah, Shilpa, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So we had a lot of group activities, right? And as happens usually, one tends to stick to people that you're comfortable with. It happens very organically. We've seen that happening even in our programs, any program for that matter. So almost towards the end of the boot camp, so there was, although we all interacted and everything, there were, certain group activities where the minute a group activity is announced, you just tend to stick to people that you've been sticking to. So there was this colleague of mine in the cohort. So she came up to me and she said, come on, let's do this activity together. And when we actually deep dived into the session, so we have these, these unconscious sort of perceptions that we naturally form, right? We discussed this during the program also. And we both went into a mode where we were just sort of, yes, I've been there, and we found out that there were so many similarities between what we both were going through in the same space, etc. So that whole perception, right? And now it's like we reach out also, I mean, generally amongst the cohort also, but other than that also, we reach out to each other and say, look, hey, what's up? I mean, this is something that's happening with me. Is it the same with you? So in a way, I would consider her also to be a mentor in my journey. I do look forward to this whole cohort that we have formed. I'm certain that, we will be continuing this relationship. So, and you never know at what time, whom you connect with and who takes on that mentorship role, sort of, to say. So there was another colleague who I'm not taking names, but just being mindful of that fact. But there was another colleague who we come from very similar backgrounds, so we were just generally discussing the similarity of our situation and everything. And in a way, she's also a great mentor because I'm learning so much from her experience. So that's one. And the other thing is also there's a very because right at the beginning when we signed up for the program, so we were to given identify an organizational advisor that we had to identify. All of us through our journey, I know at different stages, whether it is, in different phases of our career, we've all had like a particular role model or somebody that we look up to. So my organizational advisor, also the person that I put in, has been very instrumental in my professional journey so far. And here, one more thing that I had a sort of key takeaway was you don't necessarily have to sort of, have a line between your personal and professional space. You can take, I mean, in our personal space, also in our home front and everywhere, I consider my mom, my mother-in-law, everybody to be women leaders. The way they manage things, etc. Those things also trickle into our, like if I could say that, oh, this is how I'd like to tackle something at my workplace. So that was also a very important thing, because earlier I used to sort of delineate it that, okay, this is in the home space and this is at the workspace. But through the program and through the discussions that we had, we realized that we don't need to necessarily do that. So yeah, a lot of mentors. In fact, everybody has a mentor in them is what I would like to sort of say. Thanks.
I'd like to just talk to you about the imposter syndrome. So much has been said about it and written, and research says women face it. And I read a very interesting article on it recently, which said, there are biases in the workplace. There are organizations that have no place for inclusion. And so why are we assuming that the imposter syndrome is a problem for just the women? They are made to sometimes feel like imposters. So it's not, so while women can work through their leadership journey, we must look at organization level sort of change, right? To be more inclusive, be more, to have leadership skills like vulnerability accepted as a leadership skill, and, empathy and caring. These are important leadership skills. So tell me your journey in terms of this feeling of, do you feel some of the inhibitions or, what has been that journey? I'm not assuming that you had an imposter syndrome, but it's something everyone talks about, where you sometimes feel, am I good enough? Am I doing the right job? Am I doing, self-flagellation? I call it self-flagellation. I'm a big I used to be, I'm working on it. I'm getting better, but I would really beat myself up about things that really didn't matter, right? And it's been a journey in itself. So share with us a little bit about what that journey has been for you, for both of you. Chris?
So yeah, sure. So I do face this, I think, as women, and I also remember in the beginning of our program, we've been asked about how many of us do face this syndrome, and I am definitely up on the top list of it. In terms of, I think, biases, and I don't know how many people are attending over here would agree with me that we tend to feel guilty maybe a lot. And I remember one of the sessions, very beautifully spoken by Professor Vasanti. She mentioned that, if you are feeling guilty, just accept it and then move forward, because it's okay to feel how you are feeling, right? And the baggage that we carry of feel guilty and not being able to stand up, I think, is the first way of accepting that syndrome, right? And saying that, yeah, I feel bad and maybe I should not be here, and maybe I'm not good enough, to do something like this. And the creation of that and allowing it to ferment as a process, I think, is something that holds 90% of the women behind for doing this. there are multiple chores at home, taking care of, being a mother, being a daughter, being a leader, being a manager at different spaces. And I think very rightly what Shilpa also shared earlier is we hold the baggage of saying, I cannot be a mother at home and go to office and switch. It's not a switch to put off, right? And say, no, now I can't be a mother. You carry that baggage. You carry certain baggages wherever you go, and not feeling bad that you carry those baggages. It's okay. You're inviting people to be a part of that particular space of yours. And very well, I don't think sometimes the way people see you, you see yourself, right? And I think it's so important to look at yourself in the best way you are. It's been a journey for me, for sure, and I think I'm still learning and to push those barriers aside. Even today, to just be here and share uh, this with everybody, I think is a barrier in itself that we all are trying to overcome. So yeah, I'm feeling very great that we've been a part of this program, and it's allowing me to break that one barrier and push that and say that maybe I am good enough. It's okay. It's okay to accept that and say it. So yeah, that's, I think, the first norm of moving forward.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Anu. Anu, we will now move to the Q&A section. We have a bucket load of questions that have come in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to club the similar questions together. So firstly, I'll go with questions that are related to the program design and alumni engagement. And maybe I'd request Archana actually to shed some light on that. So the question is, the firstly is, I wanted to understand who can apply for this program and what stage is the correct for this to be taken up. And the second question is, how are the participants engaged after the program finishes? Is there an active alumni community? So request Archana to take this up.
Yeah, I'll start with the alumni one. And so just give me a moment. Adil, I'm just going to have to switch off the fan. Give me a minute.
Sure.
Okay. So with the alumni piece, because I was just typing that out, it might be easier for me to say that. So participants in this program become part of two alumni communities, right? One is, of course, the Emerging Women Leadership Program community. And like Chris and Shilpa was saying, that the inaugural cohort, lot of pride, and there'll be many, many more cohorts, and that tribe will continue to grow. So you will be part of this community of women who are committing to not just one's own leadership journey, but also the leadership journey of other women in the sector as a tribe. The other is really that participants become part of the wider ILSS alumni network. And today we have over 500 people that are part of the ILSS alumni community who've gone through one or more programs with us. And so there is this ongoing community of learning and networks and just partnership, right? Because what we found is that sometimes, and we've spoken a lot about networking already, just the ability to reach out and know that, okay, actually these things can happen can be really profound.
Thank you, Archana. I think the next set of questions is towards Chris. In your journey of becoming a community leader, what do you think is the important thing for building a network and overcoming that initial shyness? I know you spoke about it earlier, but if you could just shed a little more light on it.
Sure, Adil. Thanks. I think that was Prachi who asked that question. I won't say I'm great at it already, but at least in the my initial thoughts on that, Prachi, is when you are networking, don't shy to say and be proud of what you are doing. I think that's the first thing. People do understand you and your work, and when you're out there, you are representing not just your organization, not just yourself, but also the work that you are doing. So I think that is the first thing, that the moment you say what you're doing with pride, I think takes away all the shyness away. So I'm also still learning. I'm also still on that journey and walking towards that. But yeah, that's been my experience, at least so far.
Thank you, Chris. The next question is actually directed at Shilpa. How do we draw the line of being seemingly opportunist during networking? I mean, how do we realize, I mean, where do we draw the line, being a good networker and being a little too intrusive?
Yeah, so the very simple sort of when we had a very similar conversation during our discussions, and the thing that struck with me was, what's the worst that can happen? You either get a no, or you get a yes, or they're not interested. So I think it's to go with all guns blazing, really, if there is something that you're looking actively for, right? I mean, if I'm looking at a potential funder who could be interested in my program, I would give it my all. I would not draw a line. And that's helped me, because earlier I would shy away from doing it, because I would always think, would this idea seem okay, or would this be too, not really cut the mark? And by the time I overcome that hesitation, the opportunity is already passed. So one thing that came, and I'd keep ruminating over this, right? So so that's one thing which came out of the session. What's the worst that can happen? I think you should just go all guns blazing, and I think I've already started taking a lot of steps towards that, to be frank.
Right. So
Shilpa,
we've
in
talked,
fact, like they say, I just want to say, you'll remember our mantra. If you don't ask, the answer is no. So there's no harm in just asking gently, politely, sweetly, but ask.
right. So we've spoken a lot about the networking sessions, but here's a question. I think it's for both of you, Chris and Shilpa. What were the other sessions apart from networking that you found really useful, had good takeaways?
Okay, so I all the sessions have been structured very, very, very well, I must say, because they sort of seamlessly flow into each other. Some of the sessions, such as the session on storytelling, was particularly very, very not just touching, but we all know we deal with data day in and day out, how to present facts, how to present figures, etc. But that particular session was extremely interesting and thought-provoking. There was also a very interesting panel discussion with some women leaders. That was also very, very inspiring. Just hearing them speak about their journey was fantastic. And then thereafter, after the boot camp, also, while we have engaged in our online sessions, all the faculty who have come in, I'd especially like to acknowledge that each of them have brought in a certain angle which made us go, okay, we didn't think about this. And this thing was all the activities sort of engineered through the Tim Shell team, Gayatri and company. They made us do all these activities, but everything had like an underlying theme to it, and it all just tied up very beautifully. So yeah, in a nutshell, all of these sessions, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, if I may add, I think Shilpa's pretty much covered most of the sessions. And I think, like she said, every session had a continuity to the previous. So it's very difficult to say one apart from the other. But two things that I would want to add, and I think somebody else also had put down about IDP, which is the individual development plan. And I think I mentioned it a little earlier. I think that specific session has been a running thread across all our sessions. It's about how you are looking at yourself, your vision that you have, and what are the immediate steps that you want to take to reach your vision and your goal. So that, I mean, that's an ongoing process. I don't think it ends with the program. I think it's an iterative project that you will have even after you leave. So for them asking about the alumni, I think that's going to carry as an alumni project with us as we also graduate from the program. But having that and being able to evolve through it, I think is something. And of course, we've spoken a lot about the ecosystem guide. I think having that one-on-one coaching and mentoring has remarkably been very great, I think, for me personally. And Shilpa's also said how great it has been for her. So, yeah.
I just like to add that I think, we all have our own leadership styles. And that's the most important thing. There is no one leadership style. We've read so much, but as a leader today, I'm a much more emotional / vulnerable leader, but that's my style, and I own it now a lot more than I used to own it when I was younger, because I would often wear my heart on my sleeve and I felt passionately about it, sometimes tear up. My team knows how many times I tear up in team meetings, but I own it now because that's my style. And so I think your, understanding your individual leadership styles and owning it and developing it and sort of nurturing it is I think is super important, because often we led to we believe in a certain style which is almost like white male, which is great for that person, but it's not our style, and so that we need to own that, right? So I think just understanding your leadership style and what that could be, and
Right.
how you can use that.
Great. So from courses, let's move on to the diversity quotient. There's a question: how diverse is the cohort? Right. So I'd request Chris and Shilpa to talk about, how did you think diversity added to your learning in the program?
So in terms of, I mean, I was also reflecting upon this, and we were just discussing this before we came live. And it's not about, see, we are all from the social sector, but then I deal with health day in and day out. So it was very enriching for me to interact with somebody who is, say, from a livelihood sector or who's from an education sector, because ultimately we are all part of the same umbrella. So that way we had a lot of similarities, but a lot of interesting things that came out. And the other thing was, I think, just the sheer, whether it is experience or the age. So I would have a colleague who I think, oh, this was Shilpa like 10 years earlier. And, I have another colleague who I look up to, and I think, oh, perhaps this is somebody that I want to become like. So yeah, I think it was a very diverse cohort that way. Over to you.
I just add to what Chris said, right? I think what we are learning is that there are general parameters around diversity, right? So, for example, age, what is the organization, what is the sector that you're working in? And as Shilpa mentioned, there is also identities that you carry, sub identities within being a woman. And we are finding that there is diversity and similarity in it, right? So, for example, in many of our sessions, we see little babies, toddlers as part of our sessions, because there is a community of young mothers amidst the larger cohort, right? And there are another set of participants who today are straddling work as well as managing familial responsibilities with senior citizen parents. And so that's something that's on their mind as a primary caregiver. So we're finding that there are general identities that's applicable to any group of people. And then within the identity of a woman, there are sub-identities where there is sometimes more similarities and sometimes the diversity, or sometimes, people have been here 5 years ago and so are able to give another that perspective.
Sure. Thanks, Archana. Chris, your take on this.
I mean, I think Archana said it and also Shilpa did, but I was thinking about in terms of our personalities, right? I think every woman there came in carrying their own personality. It showed in through the sessions, it showed in through conversations, in the kinds of relationships that we also built outside the group, which eventually will tend to happen. I think that way we were very diverse. And to what Shilpa said, we were all from very different sectors. Because of which we were able to understand also how would people react maybe very differently because of the sector that they're coming from. I think that way the diversity was quite pronounced, I think, in the group, in the room. So yeah, it was nice to see people with very different styles of operating, like Anu also said, very different leadership styles, or just in general styles of operating. Yeah.
Sure, thanks, Chris. Also, to add to it, from an outreach point of view, as the team who's building the batch, I think very high weightage is given to different kinds of diversity, geographical, educational diversity, even professional diversity. So while you would have everyone working in the social sector, there'd be a lot of education, a lot of health, there'd be a lot of livelihood. At the same time, it'll be a mix of international NGOs, consulting organizations, also people from grassroots, also people from north, east, west, and south of the country. So that's our endeavor to really, build a very diverse cohort, because as a part of the peer learning, I think that really enriches everybody's takeaway. So moving on to our next question. And this question was about the ecosystem guides. So there's a question, what is an ecosystem guide? And, how would it help a participant of the EWLP? So maybe Shilpa and Chris, you want to talk about your experience with the ecosystem guides?
Why don't we also just share some light? So Archana, what made you choose your ecosystem guides? Because we went across the country looking for them. We were looking for somebody that we were particularly looking for. And a lot of effort went into getting our guides. And so I think it would be really nice if Archana could shed a little bit of light on what we were looking for when we went out reaching out to ecosystem guides.
Yeah, sure. And I know Shilpa mentioned earlier in terms of, because there is one sourcing of the ecosystem guides, and then there is also our approach on how the ecosystem guides get mapped to the participants. So as we were looking at the program, and I'm seeing some of the other questions as well, right? We were very clear that yes, of course, there is a learning journey that our participants need to and will go on. And equally important is the ecosystem of people that will cheer for them and support them in this journey. And so the ecosystem guides were people who we felt would give them a view of how different women have gone through this across different situations, right? And so we said, these need to be leaders who have that lighthouse view of seeing different women at action and having seen different women's leadership journey. The second thing that we said that these women need to have some understanding of the social sector, because while there is the larger gender at workplace, there are nuances that might be more specific to the social sector. And so if they have some understanding of the social sector, that was important for us. The third is we also said we want to try and source people who are at least connected to our emerging women leaders and are in conversations, partnership with them in their work, and not somebody who is, let's say in their late 60s and today is not really in touch with emerging women leaders, right? So we said there is lots to learn from them as well, but this is not the space. We want the space to be ecosystem guides, to be women leaders who have that lighthouse view of how different women have succeeded, and there's no one size fits all approach, has an overview of how social sector works, and has the touch and pulse of what are some challenges and what are things that emerging women leaders struggle with. So that's kind of how we approached it. And then, of course, based on what we saw as participants' learning needs, we tried mapping them to see how it can really help our participants. So Shilpa and Chris, that was a little bit of behind the scenes. You can tell us how it's been for you.
I think whatever you did worked very well because I mean, everyone were given, and for the question, I think, who are the ecosystem guides? They are coaches. They do, and maybe Anu or Archana can probably throw a little more light on that, but then they do coaching professionally for upcoming or even leaders. They work with organizations, and I'm assuming that ILS is also partnered with them to conduct coaching sessions for us. So that was who they were, and each of us received one coach. So these were like one-on-one sessions we had with them. And the idea is also for us to go deep down. We could ask any questions. What is it that we want to gain out of it? I don't think the coaches came with any agenda or plan to say, this is what I'm going to give you. But it was more the first question my coach asked me, and this is okay for me to share public, but the first thing that she asked me was, what is it that you want to gain out of this time that we have together? So it's whatever you take and go, whether you want to know how your leadership style is, or what are your underpinning beliefs or disbeliefs about yourself that you want to, peel. So it all depends upon what you want to take to them. And they'll probably, in the sessions that you have with them, they will help you peel that onion and understand that a little more better. So like any opportunity, I think this is also an opportunity that one has to probably create or curate for themselves with that time with their coach. So that's been my experience, and I really enjoyed it.
I just have one question to ask Chris and Shilpa. Adil, I know that we are very mindful of time. Do I have a quick minute?
Yes,
Because I know we are in the last 5 minutes of it. So, the leadership journey is it's a very personal space, right? And we're working with, y'all are working with yourselves, of course, but you're working in a cohort, but you're navigating your journey ahead. So a lot of what holds you back, or your fears or your vulnerabilities, are things that are probably there in your heart. But at what point, or did you feel more comfortable sharing it? And I haven't been in all the sessions, but I was in a few where I felt I could see women sharing, okay, this has been, this worries me, will I make a fool of myself? That's to share that in a community, a safe space. So how did you feel a feeling of, okay, this is a safe space and I can share? At what point? You didn't know each other. We were all strangers like about 8 weeks ago. So how do you feel like those barriers sort of shifted, if at all they shifted? I'm assuming they shifted. Chris, Shilpa, I know we have literally a minute for this. But
yeah, we just have, yeah. So I think it flowed very organically. Even amongst our diverse set, there were those of us who were, who were talkers, who were not so much of a, who were not so much into talking. But like I mentioned, we all just came together very organically. And even the ecosystem guide, right? I just wanted to touch upon that we touched upon diversity. That's also very diverse. It was amazing to see, even when the brochure was put out, that, oh, these are the fantastic women that, you could get connected with who are in their own leadership space. So that's really been the key moment. And I think as the program unraveled, we felt a lot more closer and connected to each other, obviously because of the time that we spend. We ensure, even though like our online sessions are literally on Saturdays, and you can imagine how hectic it becomes, but we're also charged up and so gung-ho about making it online, or even if you've missed it, like, let's just see the recording. And one important aspect of it has been I know there are templates to it and there are other things, but it's for those of us who identify with journaling and writing down things, that has been in particular very helpful, because you're in a space where you're discussing these things with fellow brilliant women colleagues who are also, going through the same system. But at the same time, you are given an opportunity to reflect upon all these things, keep it within yourself, but write all those down. So that sort of also brings a clarity. That's all.
Sure. Thank you so much, Shilpa, Chris, and Anu, for this lovely session. I think, like Chris mentioned, this onion was peeled today, layer by layer. Before we depart, I would just like to make an appeal for everyone to please help us spread the word about the second edition of the Emerging Women's Leadership Program. We are open to applications, right? The deadline for applying is 23rd December. So please do help us spread the word. If you know anyone who would benefit from this program, please connect us to her and we'll take it forward. And like always, looking forward to your continued support. Ayush, my colleague, has put the link on the chat, so you could actually forward that link. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice evening. Good night.